growing, strengthening his soul. So finally, when he's in the garden facing the most critical moment, by the way, what's he doing in the garden when he's the night before? He's praying. Is it a struggle for him? But what's he doing? He's seeking the what? The strength of God. And what's he able to do when he gets up finally? Remember what the text tells us in, I forget which gospel. Get up when he goes and sees the disciples praying. Could you not watch? Get up. My betrayer is what? And you remember when they do come in the garden scene? Remember what Jesus, he steps to meet them. He's ready, isn't he? He's ready. What have we said before when it comes to storms? And is the time to get ready right when the storm hits and starts coming on the water or on your property? You got to be prepared ahead of time. Was Jesus preparing himself ahead of time? You say, Robert, you're really beating on this. Yeah, I'm going to beat it. Because if Jesus had to have that, what about us? We got to. We got to have it. So, it's yeah, Matt, I'm sorry.
So I wonder, though, the way I read that is sometimes I wonder if Jesus is really prepared because sometimes I wonder if he really knew what was, there's no way you can know the pain that's coming.
Right.
So sometimes I wonder if Jesus isn't, because of the strength of God, he resigned himself.
Yes.
And I think there's a difference in temperament
Mm-hmm.
that, and ready is like, oh, I'm ready. But resigned is, well, I've got to do this.
Yeah. He knows what he's going to face, and he's prepared himself for that. And it's just amazing that we see that in Jesus here. Again, it's one of the great little sections here, and I don't want to. We got to get going here. Okay, so Jesus doesn't stick around. Notice this. After he went off, verse 36, Simon and his companions went to look for him. Maggie and I have joked. We joked about, especially when the kids were a little younger, although it has still happened in recent years when they get older. Like, what if we just went in the closet and hid for a while and had a conversation away from the kids, right? What if we just went out behind the garage and went down the slope of the back of the house? And because sometimes when you got kids, it's like you can't have a moment to yourself before they what? What are we doing? When are we leaving? What's for dinner? What's for lunch? Blah, 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 blah. Did you wash my clothes? Blah, 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 right? And that's kind of how the disciples are a little bit. Jesus gets out of there to go and spend some time, and they come eventually. Eventually, they do get up. And what is the first thing they do? We got to go find Jesus. And so they come and they look for him, and they found him, and they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Do you think there were some more people who showed up that morning at Peter's house? I can imagine them looking out. Hey, there's a bunch of people still that come back. And then they look around and they don't see who? Jesus. And so they go out and find him and they say, "Hey, everyone's looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so that I can preach there also. That is why I came." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. He didn't stay in one place because everyone needs to hear. And so we see that. Okay, let's quickly hear now verses 40 through 45. We haven't read this one. Who's got that for us? Mark 1, verses 40 through 45. Okay, Dolores.
And the leper came to him, beseeching him and falling on his knees before him and saying to him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." And moved with compassion, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I am willing, be cleansed." And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was cleansed. And he sternly warned him and immediately sent him away. And he said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded for a testimony to them." But he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the news about it to such an extent that Jesus could no longer publicly enter a city, but stayed out in unpopulated
Okay, one thing you see in Mark's gospel, I mean, all of the gospels emphasize it. I mean, it's there too, but in Mark's gospel, the crowds, Jesus, they're always pursuing him. And what we know they are primarily pursuing him for is what? His teachings? The healing. And you can understand that, right? I mean, that's not a hard thing to stretch the imagination why they would want to. But his purpose was not to come and heal people. It's to save them, and that salvation begins by spreading the good news of what? His kingdom. Oh, absolutely, he had compassion. Yeah, he's going to have compassion. But his compassion, he does not allow that to control and dictate, neglecting his greater mission. His greater mission was to prepare hearts and minds for the salvation of their souls. And if you had any question about that, we're going to see it in just a second here in Mark chapter 2 with the paralytic. But leprosy was terrible. You know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we know this. It was a terrible, dreaded skin disease. It was flesh rotting. You understand the Levitical code. You had to be quarantined. You had to live outside the city. You would have to go show yourself to the priest if you thought you had some sort of disease, because this could spread, this could be contagious, and it could wipe out villages and towns, so to speak. And so the priests were the first line of defense to kind of make sure if you had this. They would have to identify themselves when they were in the midst of other people, in areas of crowds. Unclean, unclean. If you heard that in an area, a marketplace, you knew immediately someone with leprosy is right around you. And so they had to live outside the village in these leper communities. And misery loves company. And that's all they had, other lepers. You couldn't go live with your family. You couldn't go live in the community. You couldn't go to, you can't go sit down and, hey, how was your week here? You can't go sit down in the synagogue like that and start interacting, and that's going to cause trouble, and it does for Jesus here in some ways. And so he is, and yet what is amazing about that is does that stop the leper? What? He comes down and comes to Jesus, falls on his knees and says, if you're willing, you can make me clean. All I want to say about verse 41 is there is some translation, but I think the NIV gets it. Some that will say, the NIV has, he was indignant. Does somebody have another translation? What does yours say, Dolores? Yeah, compassion. Moved, okay, yeah. Yeah, I think NIV's got it, though, more than compassion. This is a word that is an emotional response. You're going to see it a couple of times in Mark's gospel. When Jesus is faced with the reality of what sin does, because when sin entered the world, not only did it cause a spiritual separation, it also affected physically. It also affected the world. The creation itself even was subjected to the fall. And so ultimately, disease, illness, sickness, blindness, natural calamities, these sort of things, they weren't in the garden. They weren't a part of God's plan for creation. This came as a result of the fall of sin. Now, that doesn't mean, you got to be careful. You don't make a one-to-one correlation. Somebody's had something bad happen to them. Maybe they've gotten some kind of disease or sickness or whatever. Their home was struck by a tornado. And you don't want to be like Job's friends who said what? You've sinned, like one-to-one. Like, what have you done specifically? No, but what do we know is ultimately the cause of all sickness, disease, death, the fall, the sin. And when Jesus saw it, on a couple of occasions in Mark's gospel, he was indignant. He was angry. He was upset by it. And he's moved with compassion because he sees the effects of what it does for people. So someone says, is he indignant or does he have compassion? Yes, he has both. But I think this is better translated indignant, and that's how Mark uses this word a couple of times, and I think that's why the NIV is more consistent in using it than had he was filled with compassion. But yes, he's always filled with compassion, but we know that. We've been taught that. We haven't been taught Jesus was indignant about the effects of sin.
Hey, Rob.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, I think that's important that Jesus didn't heal all those people.
That's right.
You made the comment that he didn't come to heal people.
That's right.
But, in the story of the man that was lowered down, the crippled guy,
Now, we're going to get to that now. You're getting into my...
messed
Yeah, you're messing a little bit here.
Hold on.
Well, you're there. Well, you got me. Okay. All right. So let's quickly here. He sees this man who's a leper. He reached out and touched the man. All of that would be messing with, the religious leaders, everyone would be in shock that Jesus is touching. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately the leprosy left him. It's always immediate, the power of God. And I love that he says, Jesus said, I am willing. Is Jesus always ready and willing and ready to heal and cleanse? Absolutely. And of course, spiritually, that is what these stories are really pointing towards. Jesus sent him away at once, and now we have the warnings that you find in the Gospels. Don't tell anyone. But you also find them not doing what Jesus says. See to it that you don't tell anyone this. Go show yourself to the priest. Make a sacrifice of a praise and offering to God. This is where they would enter back into the community, that they've been cleansed, and giving a testimony. But instead, he is going to go out and tell everybody what's happened to him. And I kind of look at it this way. Here's how I view Jesus knows they're going to do this. I kind of look at it like Jesus is maybe saying, he knows, hey, just let me get out of town before you go crazy, putting on social media, putting on billboards. Because again, to Jeff's point, we're going to see illustrated here in chapter 2, his purpose wasn't primarily to come only and heal physical diseases. He could have done that 24/7 his entire life and not got around to the greatest need. It's not that it's not a need, it is a need. And God's concerned about our body, and he has compassion, but our greatest need is our soul. And so we see that thus illustrated here quickly in chapter 2. Let me get into this here, chapter 2, real quick. By the way, disciples will see and they'll tell. That's what disciples do. And we also know Jesus sees us more than we see ourselves. He sees us as we really are, even if we don't see ourselves as worthy or have any value, or Jesus sees us for truly who we are. But yeah, go ahead. No.
What I was going to say too, I didn't want to step on your toes there, but so the idea that Jesus didn't heal all those people. A lot of people today, it's kind of like me praying for my dad. If it doesn't go the way they want, a lot of people lose faith. They
Yeah.
go, God doesn't answer prayers.
Yeah.
But that's the example.
Yeah.
Jesus didn't go around and, hey, make sure everybody in this town that's sick, I got to heal them.
And how many of these people that Jesus healed eventually died? I mean, are any of them alive today? All of them died. So the goal is not to, physically, that's not the ultimate goal. And so absolutely his purpose was, there were greater purposes. By the way, primary and secondary doesn't mean it's not important. It just means it's not the first primary importance. And we see what is when Jesus gives us we have this incredible story of Jesus healing the man who is paralyzed with his 4 friends. Let me just set it up this way. We'll come back to it. You've got 5 controversies in Mark chapter 2 through chapter 3, verse 5. This paralytic story is about forgiveness of sins. Because Jesus, first thing he's going to do when he sees them lowering their friend, is going to say, not you're healed. He's going to say, your sins are forgiven. And they're going to say to themselves, who does he think he is? Only God can forgive sin. Yeah, ding, 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 that's right. The controversy of not just calling tax collectors and sinners, he's going to eat with them. He's going to fellowship with them. And that's going to get the Pharisees grumbling and criticizing. And he receives sinners, and and Jesus will talk about that. It's not the healthy that need a doctor, but those who are sick. They're going to have controversy about John's disciples and the Pharisees with fasting. Eating, you got another eating controversy. Eating, the apostles, disciples are going to walk through and they're going to pluck some grain of wheat and they're going to eat it. And they're going to say they're working on the Sabbath. And then you've got this man with a withered hand who Jesus will heal on the Sabbath. A lot of these are involving the Sabbath as well. So you got 5 controversies. It always cracks me up. We're not going to be able to get into the story of the paralytic here. We'll have to pick it up next. But let me just say this. When people say, well, why didn't Jesus, say this or do that? And they'll say, well, he didn't want to cause a big controversy in his ministry. I'm always like, what are you talking about? Jesus was very controversial. Now, there's a difference between saying that and saying we ought to, thrive on, being controversial. Now, I will say this. Jesus is going to poke the bear. Jesus is going to, I think he's going to do some of the things he's going to do so he can bring the issue to the light. I think Jesus is going to, what's the word I'm looking for? He's going to kind of, not egg it on, the issue, but he's going to agitate. He's going to stir it up a little bit. He's going to do that to get people to think and to look at their heart. Now, that's not the same as saying, well, we ought to just be controversial just to be controversial and make people mad. And no, but Jesus is going to do that, and he's going to do it in this home where we're going to see this this first century home. We'll come back to this. This is one that would have like a two or three level story home, and if you count the roof. Most of these would be single floor homes, but there were 2-story, if you count the roof, homes. Here's another model. You'd have kind of a courtyard, and then you'd have a lot of these would have a stairway to go up to the roof. You'd have a one door to enter, and here's a kind of a model of that. These walls are basically mud brick covered with clay and straw. They're not the most sturdiest in the world, but they would also come in the door. They would often have a stable or a little barn. And of course, that's interesting because Jesus, where was he placed? In the stable. Out there no, he was in the house. That's a big, don't get me, but yeah. You're saying they had their animals in their homes? Yes. And so they would have, and this is where they would make accommodations for people. We look at the story of Jesus' birth and we say, oh, how could they do it? That's actually a story showing their hospitality to find a room anywhere they could find, and somebody did find a place for Jesus, and it was going to be where the animals would lay. But you'd have a kitchen area, and then you'd have an upstairs if they were of any wealth. And there'd be a room or two, and then you'd have a roof where they would go up and often pray or put animal skins or whatever up there. And we know that Peter's house has this kind of structure. So Peter is a man of some means. That does not mean he's a wealthy rich man, but he's not in poverty like others might be. He does have a home, and his family lives with him, including his mother-in-law. And so they will go up on the roof, and they will begin to, because they can't get in, because the door is what? There's people what? Everywhere, all over. You can't get in here. And so they're going to go up on the roof and tear open the roof, the straw, and the mud, and they're going to lower their friend down to Jesus. So be looking at that story, and then we'll look at that story a little bit in more detail for next time. All right. Glad you guys are here this morning. or this morning, this evening. But whatever it is,